Fellow YouTuber, Jehovah's Eternal One, did a video response to video 34, a question for all Jehovah's Witnesses. I will not respond to every comment made, but to assure all that, God permitting, I will address all his points in subsequent videos. Here, I will just make a few comments and ask a few questions. Join us.
Hi, Geo here. This is a response to Watchtower examination. I'm going to open a dialogue with him since we've been going back and forth through replies, and I don't really like to type. I like to use my words. So, what we've been talking about is the Israelites and the Ten Commandments, and I don't really know where he's going with what he's going to say. I might be jumping the gun, but I do feel it necessary to elaborate on God and the Israelites and the Ten Commandments, and are we supposed to be following the commandments now? I think that's an important topic.
My brother, I have been having this discussion with persons from different denominations over 30 years now, and I have found a few problems in settling the issue. The way you have started represents one of the biggest challenges. Persons predetermine where you are going and jump ahead to address the issues before they are touched on. Imagine saying to a student, even at the university level, okay, I know what the syllabus for this course is, so allow me to get to the conclusion so I can prepare you for the final exam. You cannot do that. You have to touch on the various aspects of the syllabus one by one, ventilating each stage to ensure the various chapters are thoroughly covered before the candidate can sit in the exam room. I do not believe that time is against us, so there is no need to jump the gun. So, in discussing this subject of the law, I will be taking it one step at a time, one aspect at a time.
But before I even get into that topic, I want to tell you what I call these topics. I call these topics Bible fan fiction. I call them Bible fan fiction because I think I know where he's getting ready to go with this, and even if he's not, a lot of people have went the route, well, we should keep the Sabbath, and we should still be following the law, the covenant. But there's just as much evidence contrary to that as for that. And it really boils down to a person's own interpretation of the scripture.
No, it does not boil down to our own interpretation. Here's what it boils down to. What is it that God does intend? If it really did boil down to just our own opinion, why are we even having this conversation? It would suffice that I read the Bible and conclude I must keep the commandments. You read it and you conclude we should not. Then we both go our way. I'm happy, you're happy, God is happy. Isn't that right? There is a superior power, God, and what it boils down to is this. What is really God's will for you and for me?
But the God of the Bible is not a God that is going to punish you if you're getting that wrong one way or the other. Because we are in such a time of deception, things are going to be harder and harder to figure out, and unless we simplify our faith, we're all going to be misled, because the only people that aren't are going to be the elect. So, with that being said, this is fan fiction. It's like talking about science fiction movies. It's fun, it's exciting, and we all like to puff ourselves up and think our interpretation is the best one and everybody should follow what we say. When it comes down to faith, I believe in simplifying. I did a video on Armageddon Survival Guide. Check it out if you want to understand this concept. But if we're truly in the body of Christ, we need to not cling on to those small ideas and simplify. If we do that, then there's a foolproof way to know you're doing the right thing and you're not going to be misled. So now that I got all that out of the way, let's have some Bible fan fiction. Let's have some fun. people go on and on about the covenant and the law, and that we should still follow it. And my argument on that, firstly, is that even Jesus told them that, you know, this is the law of death, and I'm bringing you words of life here. That legalism is not what he wants, and it's not hard. There's not a set of rituals you need to follow to worship your God. He wants us to be connected with the earth, more primitive, less society and builders. So I also did a video called "Is God Cruel?" and I went into the Israelites a little bit on that. The thing to understand about the Israelites was, where was God going with all of this? What was his intent? And understanding that intent can help you figure out if you need to be following Mosaic law or not. You look at what the Israelites were, who they were, and what God was doing with them. What was happening was God took them out of Egypt. And that was the point where God wanted them to be the physical spokesperson on earth for all time of the human race. That even though the earth was an imperfect place full of wicked men, there can be a separated people following God's laws exactly, with his very visible backing. They had the ark. They dropped the walls in Jericho. Wherever they went, they had a pillar of fire or smoke to lead them. These people were, without a doubt, visibly backed by a very powerful God, the only true God. So what God was trying to do with these people was, he was trying to make them an example for the rest of human society. He put them in a central location, gave them a promised land, and that was going to be home base. And what he was doing with that was, he was altering their DNA. He was altering the way they live as a society and the way they worship. The commands were in there for moral reasons, but also for physical reasons, to abstain from blood, to not eat pork products. All of these things, over the course of thousands of years, would have changed their DNA. And they would have, it's what makes different ethnic backgrounds different. Your location, the physical environment, the minerals in the water, and the foods you're eating. And that's why people think God was a violent God, because the God of the Old Testament is so violent, but then Jesus comes on the scene and he's all about love. Because the God of the Old Testament is so violent and warring, and Jesus is peaceful and pacifist and loving, people think there's an inconsistency in the Bible, and that God is not the same God throughout, that one is an older pagan God and the other one is a different God. But what they're not realizing is what God was trying to do with those people. The act of claiming a territory as his chosen people's land, and then going in and slaughtering everything, not just letting the women and children live, or even killing all of the people and letting the animals live. We don't know how they were living, but God found those local people detestable, and they were doing unclean things. So chances are, just like you see what we're doing today, we're genetically modifying our food to get bigger yields out of our crops, and in the process we're messing with something we shouldn't be messing with, and we're making unhealthy people. God knows this. So when he went in there, he made sure none of the old DNA was going to be passed forward through breeding with the people, or through taking in of their food, taking their heirloom seeds and for hundreds of years eating from those corrupt seeds. Everything was to be destroyed. So the point Watchtower Examination I think he's trying to make is the Ten Commandments and then the Mosaic Law. The Mosaic Law was huge and there was a lot in there. It was very detailed. But then the Ten Commandments were so short and so simple. And God, with his own hand, wrote those words. So what is so important about them? And where I think he's going with this, if he's not, I apologize, but other people have gone with this and it needs to be said. Where I think he's going with this is to say we got to keep the Sabbath and the commandments. No, we don't. The Sabbath is not for us. Nothing that applies to Israel was for us. And the commandments are very simple. And there's great stuff in there. And whether we follow the commandments or not, we shouldn't have pagan gods. We other gods than God. We shouldn't covet. We shouldn't steal. We shouldn't murder. All of those things are a given.
Wow, that is precious. Let me deal with just one of the commandments you mentioned. Whether we keep the first commandment or not, we should not worship pagan gods. So God says, thou shalt not. Jehovah's Eternal One says, we shouldn't. What's the difference? Should we keep the 10 commandments?
No, we don't. The commandments are very simple. And there's great stuff in there. And whether we follow the commandments or not, we shouldn't have pagan gods.
But we should not worship pagan gods. My brother, what you have just displayed is what I have been contending with for 30 years. People who are using words but not apparently understanding what they are saying. You said,
no, we don't.
But what does it practically mean?
The commandments are very simple. And there's great stuff in there. And whether we follow the commandments or not, we shouldn't have pagan gods. We other gods than God. We shouldn't covet. We shouldn't steal. We shouldn't murder. All of those things are a given.
You cannot have it both ways. You cannot tell me I should not keep the commandments, then tell me I shouldn't worship pagan gods. Allow me to work out what you are saying to me. Whether or not I keep the commandments, I should not worship pagan gods. Let me look at it from both scenarios, whether or not. So, if I do not keep the first commandment and I worship Isis, I shouldn't worship pagan gods. Okay. And if I do keep the commandments and I refuse to worship Isis, I shouldn't worship other gods. Sometimes when I hand in an assignment to a teacher, it would be given back to me to try again for a better grade. I am going to figuratively give back this video to you to work on it and come back again. Do sort out that little bit about whether or not we keep the commandments. We shouldn't. It's a given. Fix it up and let's continue another day. I have placed a link below for viewers who want to continue watching. In ending this video here, my brother, I am not being disrespectful or treating you with disdain. I will be responding to your various points one by one in subsequent videos. As I told you before, it would take hours to respond to every point and explain the Bible's position. That is why I opted, even before our conversation began, to address this issue one point at a time. Do join me in the next set of videos dealing with this subject of the law of God.